guys, it is happening. We are back in business this Sunday night and we are getting right into it. We're starting our sex series this week. I want to kind of outline what our whole sex series is going to be about, and then I want to drill down specifically into this Sunday. So that you know where we're going with this whole thing, we alternate every other year of what kind of approach we take with our sex series. We do this every year, but last year we talked about sexual identity. We really harped into what is the LGBT community's interaction with Christianity and how does that go back and forth. It was a lot of fun. It was a great conversation. This year we are really diving into personal sex ethics. How far is too far? Should I be dating? That kind of stuff. So this whole series is going to be focused on personalizing this kind of Christian sex ethic. What we're going to do throughout this series is we're going to constantly be leaning into a few different avenues. First and foremost is we're going to be leaning into the idea that it's okay to talk about this sort of stuff. You as a small group leader, your number one goal in this series is creating a warm and safe space to be able to have awkward conversations. It is okay to let kids feel uncomfortable in this and then show them on the other side of it. Like, look at this. Good things came out of this. We're starting the conversation. That's the big thing. Another big thing is we're going to constantly be talking about wisdom throughout this series. A lot of these questions that we're going to be diving into they have a cut and dry answer on one side and a cut and dry answer on the other side. And then there's a lot of confusing gray middle ground that we're going to just step into that kind of muddied space and ask the question, what does wisdom guide us to? We're constantly going to be coming back to the idea that Jesus is the wisdom from God and that we have this in our spirits because of the Holy Spirit. We can do this. We can have these great conversations. So, what is our series going to actually play out like? The very first week, this Sunday, we are going to be getting into the idea of singleness being a gift from God. We're going to really lay into 1 Corinthians where Paul is laying out all of this sex ethics because the Corinthians are just a wild group. And we're going to be talking about the phrase that moment when Paul says, I wish that you guys were like me, single. It's a gift from God. And for me personally, I was dating the woman that I married, Megan. I was dating her at 18 and we got married at 21. So my experience of being able to say that singleness is a gift from God is rather lacking. But it's going to be a great conversation. I think that it'll be a lot of fun to kind of step into this. And the idea that we're driving at is that we don't need a romantic relationship to fulfill us. But God can do that. We should not be looking at a boy or a girl to fill the thing in our heart that only God was meant to fill. And that's going to be the main push that we make this first week. The second week, we're going to make almost the opposite push. We're going to get into the very risque book of the Song of Songs. The more studying that I've been doing in this book, it is wild. There's actually some ancient Jewish traditions that wouldn't even allow young boys and girls to read this book until they had their bar or bat mitzvah. So this book is in very many, for a long time, it was considered almost erotica. It is just a wild book and it's in our Holy Scriptures. And the idea being that we can be attracted to people, and that is a completely normal thing in our lives, and it's worth being celebrated. These two people in the Song of Songs are really, really into each other, and we should celebrate that. And that's what we're going to lean into. We're going to kind of take some portions from that book, and we're going to kind of say, what is this teaching us? When he says this to her, what can we take away from that? It's not going to be the exact compliments. I wouldn't encourage any boy to go up to a girl and be like, your teeth look like a bunch of sheep on all the hills. It is a nice compliment if you think about it, but it's also a weird one. Instead, we're going to take these ideas and say what does this mean for us now? How can we implement this in our dating lives? The third week that we get into this, we're going to start asking the question, Jesus draws a really hard line at don't lust. In Matthew chapter 5, he even says, if this is causing you a problem, like you should just pluck your eyes out. Like he is very set on that. But Jesus also read the Song of Songs, which is these two people really into each other. So where is that middle ground where our physical attraction to somebody starts to become lust? And how do we manage that kind of idea? That week, we're going to be getting into the issues with pornography and objectification of other people, both men and women. And we're going to be talking about what both genders can and should be doing in that. You know, there's some really great passages that are really for both groups. They say, men, you shouldn't be doing this. Women, you shouldn't be doing this. So that's what we're going to be getting into that week. Our final week is going to be all about, all right, let me think through this again. We got singleness, dating, lust. Our last week is going to be all about sexual integrity versus sexual purity. We're going to, once again, paint those lines and say, these are things that God is pretty clear. This is the line. This is sin. And we're not saying this so that we can get as close to it as possible without technically crossing over it. But we're going to talk about where's that gray area, where should Christians hang out, and how that's going to be different for different people. Some of us are going to have kind of that weaker brother mentality from Romans chapter 8, where it's this idea like, I need to be way back here. And other Christians are going to be like, well, I'm totally comfortable and guilt-free right here, and the boundary's over here. But we're also really going to dive into the idea that if you pass that line, if you go too far with a boy or a girl, that you aren't now damaged goods. You're not a terrible person. God isn't going to sit there and beat you down and condemn you and hate you. His grace is massive. But we are going to highlight that this carries some real consequences and ramifications. That week, we're going to be looking at David and Bathsheba, and how David sexually abuses this woman, and how God forgives David, but has still real consequences in his life. And that's going to be kind of the pathway that we take with that. So that's everything going on in this series. And this week, what we're going to be doing is just kind of starting the conversation, saying like, hey, we're going to be talking about dating. We're going to be talking about singleness specifically. And what I would love for you to do is, first off, look over convos. Those are all live. If you have any updates, please let me know. But secondly, is remember your life when you were a teenager. How much were you talking about sex? Probably to adults, if you're like me, it was basically minimal. It was probably zero. And so what you're doing right now, this Sunday, is you're stepping into something and trying to force students to do something that you've never done, most likely. Maybe you had an amazing role model and an adult in your life that you could talk openly about sex stuff with, but you might not have. And so remember just how awkward, how uncomfortable you would have felt if you were 13 or 15 or 18. And this might be dredging some really difficult stuff up. And so as you get into this week, we're slowly building this on-ramp into harder and harder conversations. I'd say be patient. Remember that these students are going through a lot, and that trying to talk about this stuff, this might be the first time that they've ever flexed this muscle. So bear with them. Care for them. I know that you already do this, but I just want to make that our big reminder that this small group time might be real awkward. It might feel like the longest 30 minutes ever for everybody in the room. And that's okay. The big thing with this, as we get into this series, is remember that it is always better to be interested rather than interesting. Keep asking more questions. Keep asking follow-up questions. Ask them to clarify. Remember, to rephrase what they've said and listen really well, because that is going to pay huge dividends every single week as we get into this. Guys, I love getting to serve with you. I cannot wait to serve with you this Sunday night. as we are getting ready for this, would you be reading through these scriptures? Would you be meditating on these ideas and praying over this as well, that the Lord would work through all of us to guide these students to know and love him better, and that they would experience a Jesus transformation as well. Love you guys. See y'all on Sunday night.